The command center hummed with precision as the alien leader stood tall, his eyes fixated on a blue and green planet displayed on the central holographic map. Earth. A world they had monitored for years, deeming it unworthy of concern. This was merely another primitive species inhabiting an abundant, but otherwise insignificant rock. They had conquered hundreds of planets, each species more resilient than the last. Humans, they concluded, were no different. Weak, divided, and lacking in technological prowess. They were ripe for subjugation. The leader issued a directive: deploy the reconnaissance team. 5 elite scouts, their armor glistening in the pale light, prepared for the mission. They exchanged confident looks. This was routine. Earth's inhabitants were little more than primitive bipeds, their greatest weapons still reliant on combustion and projectiles. An easy task, they thought, almost beneath their expertise. The ship sliced through space, descending toward Earth's surface undetected by any of the planet's primitive satellites. The vessel hovered over a forested region, thick with towering trees and dense underbrush. Their sensors swept the area, searching for signs of human life. For now, nothing moved. The planet was quiet. Touchdown was seamless. The scouts emerged, sleek and tall, their advanced equipment making them nearly invisible against the backdrop of the forest. They exchanged a quick glance, their suits translating the Earth's atmospheric conditions, recalibrating for this alien environment. A fleeting concern passed through one of the scouts' minds. These trees were massive, the air too still. But they dismissed it just as quickly. Primitive. Easy prey. Their helmets displayed visual scans of the area, tagging the local wildlife. A deer sprinted through the brush, untagged, irrelevant. A rabbit darted between rocks, insignificant. Their mission was humans. The planet's apex species, if one could even call them that. Their scanners picked up faint signs, remnants of a campfire, trampled grass, and discarded tools. Crude, rudimentary. They barely understand fire. One scout scoffed through his comms. The others chuckled in agreement. These creatures were no different from the early species on other worlds they had dominated. It would be a quick study, a quick report back, and then their superiors would decide how best to proceed with planetary domination. As they moved deeper into the forest, their confidence only grew. No signs of defenses, no significant technology, nothing that posed a threat to their mission. One of the scouts paused, his visor picking up a set of human footprints, small and light, leading into the thicket. He bent down, examining them. Humans, he muttered. His voice carried no urgency, just disinterest. But something tugged at him, a whisper of unease, too faint to name. The squad pressed forward, dismissing the tracks. Their sensors flickered briefly, catching faint echoes of movement ahead. Again, nothing registered as a threat. But there was something off about the way the humans moved. Almost deliberate. Purposeful, but faint. Distant noises reached their ears, wind rustling through leaves, the snap of a twig, something indistinguishable. Dismissed again. We should observe them from closer, another scout suggested. The leader of the squad nodded, agreeing. Why waste energy fighting what didn't need fighting? Let them study the natives, gather intelligence, then report back. Simple. They activated their cloaking fields, blending into the environment like shadows. No human would detect them. They were ghosts. As they moved closer to the origin of the sounds, their scanners picked up a heat signature. One human, walking alone through the woods. Unarmed. It was almost too easy. One scout motioned to flank the human, creeping along the trees, quiet, precise. Suddenly, the human stopped. Stood still. The scouts froze as well, perplexed. Had the human noticed something? Impossible. Their cloaking was impenetrable, undetectable to any technology Earth had. But the human's head turned slightly, as if listening. A chill ran down one of the scout's spines, though he quickly suppressed it. The human resumed walking. Nothing to worry about. But something had shifted in the air. An almost imperceptible tension. More sounds. Faint. Footsteps? No. Quieter than that. like whispers carried on the wind, surrounding them, but distant. The scout team adjusted their visual filters, cycling through infrared and motion detection. There was nothing. Just the human, moving deeper into the forest. "Let's get closer," the squad leader ordered. They moved in unison, silent as predators. The human ahead of them vanished from sight behind a ridge, moving into a small valley. The squad followed, their steps measured, careful. They would capture this one and study him up close. But as they crested the ridge, they saw nothing. No human. The valley below was empty. Confusion rippled through the team. One scout checked his sensors again. The heat signature was gone. A moment of silence stretched between them. Then, the leader's comms crackled. "Scanners malfunctioning. All units recalibrate." They obeyed, but the readings remained erratic, flickering in and out. It didn't make sense. No species on Earth had the ability to interfere with their systems. They paused, uncertain for the first time. A noise echoed behind them. A rustle in the leaves, soft but intentional. They spun around, weapons at the ready, but again saw nothing. The forest seemed to close in around them. Every shadow stretched longer, every sound carried an edge of menace. The squad leader clenched his jaw, eyes darting from tree to tree. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. They were the hunters here. This was their mission, their territory. Yet, another sound, closer this time. Too close. A whisper, a breath, and the unmistakable sound of a twig snapping underfoot. The leader signaled for silence, but the tension was palpable now. Every scout's eyes widened beneath their visors, scanning the trees, the ground, the sky. Where were the humans? Then, through the dense trees, faint movement. Silhouettes. They had found them. But there was no relief. Only the unsettling realization that the humans had been there all along, watching. Waiting. The alien squad moved deeper into the forest, tension rising with each step. Their technology, flawless on so many worlds, was failing them here. Readings flickered in and out, useless. The sensors that once identified every living creature in the area were blind, giving nothing but static. Still, they pushed forward, confident in their superiority. How could a species like this, a species that barely understood flight, pose any real threat? But something was wrong. The leader's thoughts were cut short by a sudden, muffled sound. He glanced to his right. One of his scouts was gone, vanished. No flash of movement, no warning, just gone. The others whipped around, scanning the area with weapons drawn, but their sensors showed nothing. Only the silent trees and underbrush swayed in the wind. A brief murmur broke through their comms, but it was quickly lost to static. The leader signaled for calm. It must be an equipment malfunction, maybe a terrain issue. But the pit in his stomach told him otherwise. Another sound, this time behind them. They turned as one, only to find a second scout missing. Panic flashed through the remaining team. They activated their cloaking fields, but even that offered no comfort. They were supposed to be invisible, untouchable. And yet, one by one, they were being hunted. The leader's thoughts raced. This didn't make sense. Their training had prepared them for every possible outcome, except this. Where were the humans? How were they doing this? His fingers twitched toward the communication device strapped to his arm, attempting to hail the ship. Silence answered him. They moved quickly now, darting between trees, trying to find cover, but every step seemed to betray their position. The forest itself felt alive, as if every rock and tree conspired against them. Something snapped nearby, and they flinched, weapons aimed, but again, nothing. No visual confirmation, no heat signatures. They were blind. Then, without warning, a third scout dropped. This time, there was blood, dark and unfamiliar on the forest floor. The leader crouched by the body, eyes wide. The wound was clean, precise. A spear-like weapon, primitive yet effective. He scanned the area again, his vision blurring with fear. This wasn't a random attack. They were being targeted. Stalked. The humans knew they were here, knew how to fight them, and worse, they were winning. Regroup, the leader barked, his voice straining against the rising panic. But regroup where? There was no safe zone, no fallback point. Every step they took felt like moving deeper into the human's web. A fourth scout fell, this time screaming as he was pulled into the underbrush by something unseen. The leader ran to him, but he was already gone, leaving behind only a trail of disturbed dirt and broken branches. Whatever had taken him did so without leaving a trace. Fear gnawed at him now. These weren't the primitive creatures they had expected. They were hunters, silent, calculating, relentless. He could feel their presence everywhere, though his eyes betrayed him, showing nothing but shadows. The humans were using the terrain, the environment itself, as their weapon. His advanced tech was worthless here. He realized then that the humans didn't need the gadgets, the lasers, the spacecraft. They had the one thing that mattered on this planet, knowledge of how to survive. One scout remained by his side now. Just two of them left. The leader's breathing was ragged. He had never been this close to death. Not like this. Not hunted like an animal. His hand hovered over his sidearm, but it felt useless, heavy in his grip. The scout beside him shuddered suddenly, eyes wide with terror, and then he, too, was gone, pulled into the darkness with a gurgling scream. The leader didn't even look back. He ran. Branches clawed at him as he sprinted through the forest, stumbling over roots and rocks, his armor catching on the underbrush. His breath came in ragged gasps, and the sound of his own pounding heartbeat filled his ears. He no longer cared about the mission. Survival was all that mattered now. But even as he ran, he knew it was pointless. He could hear them, faint footsteps, whispers in the dark, always just behind him, never far. The humans were toying with him, letting him think he had a chance. He tripped, falling hard into the dirt. He scrambled to his feet, but it was too late. He could feel them closing in. Desperate, he fumbled for his comms again, hands shaking as he tried to send a signal to the ship. Nothing. Only static. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His mouth was dry, his throat constricted with terror. Then there it was, the final sound. The unmistakable crunch of a footstep, deliberate, just behind him. Slowly he turned, knowing what he would see, but still not prepared for the reality. Nothing. Only the trees, the wind, the rustling leaves. But he knew. They were there. Waiting. The last thing he heard before the world went black was the soft whisper of breath, the hiss of something sharp cutting through the air. And then silence. The forest was eerily silent now. No more rustling of leaves, no sudden movements in the underbrush. Only the wind, carrying with it the faint scent of blood and ozone. The bodies of the alien scouts lay scattered across the forest floor, their advanced armor cracked, their weapons abandoned where they had fallen. The once imposing technology they carried now seemed insignificant, broken remnants strewn about like discarded toys. For a long moment, nothing stirred. Then, from the shadows, the humans emerged. They moved with deliberate calm, their footsteps barely audible as they approached the alien bodies. There was no rush, no sense of urgency. They had all the time in the world. A figure bent down beside one of the alien scouts, studying the unfamiliar technology with a critical eye. It was sophisticated, beyond anything the humans had ever developed, but that didn't matter. They would figure it out. They always did. Another human approached, lifting an alien weapon from the dirt, turning it over in their hands. The design was foreign, but the mechanics were simple enough. It wouldn't take long before they understood how to use it, or to improve it. They began gathering the pieces of alien tech, carefully dismantling what they couldn't carry, leaving nothing behind but the bodies. There was no sign of hesitation, no fear. They had done this before. And they would do it again. Far above the planet, in the cold expanse of space, the alien command center was in chaos. Monitors flickered, displaying broken transmissions from the reconnaissance team. Static crackled through the comms, interspersed with panicked voices, urgent commands, and then silence. The leader, once so confident in their species' superiority, stood motionless before the central console. His eyes flickered with disbelief as the final images from the scouts' body cams played out on the screen. Blurry, distorted glimpses of the humans, moving like shadows through the forest. Every attempt to engage had been futile. Every precaution had failed. The leader's hands clenched at his sides, the weight of the situation sinking in. They had underestimated these creatures, gravely. The humans had been nothing more than a curiosity, a primitive species to be catalogued and subdued. But now, the leader felt something he had never associated with this backwater planet. Fear. The last few transmissions from the team played again, looping on the screen, a garbled voice calling for extraction, the frantic sound of footsteps running through the forest, the sickening thud of something sharp hitting flesh. Then, only static. The leader's chest tightened. He had seen worlds fall, species much more advanced than humans crushed beneath the might of their empire. But these humans, they were different. The room was silent now, all eyes on the leader, waiting for his next move. For a long moment, he said nothing. His mind raced, weighing the options. A retreat seemed cowardly, but the thought of launching a full-scale assault without truly understanding what they were dealing with was a risk he was no longer sure he wanted to take. His thoughts were interrupted by a distant sound, static, then a faint signal cutting through. Another broken transmission, this time from the ship's long-range sensors. Hostile, preparing. The words were garbled, but the meaning was clear. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were preparing for something larger. Something worse. The leader's throat tightened. If they didn't act now, if they didn't bring the full weight of their empire down on this planet, these humans would evolve. They would learn from this encounter, as they had from countless others, and they would become a threat beyond anything he had ever imagined. But even as the leader considered his options, a sinking feeling settled in his gut. It might already be too late. These humans, these so-called primitives, were far more dangerous than any species they had ever encountered. Their ability to adapt, to learn, to use the environment to their advantage, it was unlike anything he had seen. And now, they had access to alien technology. They would study it, reverse engineer it, and in time, they would become even more formidable. He stared at the screen, watching as the last of the scouts' transmissions flickered out. The humans were out there, somewhere, watching the skies. They knew the aliens were still observing, still planning, and yet they didn't seem concerned. If anything, they seemed ready. The leader's hand hovered over the control panel. He could order an immediate attack, unleash the full force of their armada on this planet before the humans had a chance to grow any stronger. But the doubt lingered, gnawing at him. Would it be enough? On the surface, the humans continued their quiet work. They moved with precision, collecting what they needed, leaving behind only what was useless. They worked in silence, their eyes scanning the sky from time to time, aware that they were being watched. And yet, there was no fear in their movements. Only purpose. One of them paused, looking up at the clouds, as if sensing something just beyond sight. For a moment, they stood still, their eyes narrowing in contemplation. Then, with a small nod, they turned back to the task at hand, unconcerned with whatever lay above. In the command center, the alien leader felt a cold dread wash over him. He gave the order, his voice hollow. Prepare the fleet. But deep down, he knew. Whatever war was coming, the humans would be ready. The sky was clear as the humans melted back into the forest, their figures disappearing into the shadows. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faint sound of distant footsteps, growing quieter with each passing second, until all that remained was the silence of an untouched world. And somewhere, high above, an alien leader stared at a planet that had become far more dangerous than anyone could have predicted.